Makers of Awesome, it's Prof G, and once again we have a less polished lesson here, but that's because it's a solution for 2 more questions from our 7-question in-class exam for my physical computing course. So students had to build 7 CircuitPython builds in 2.5 hours. These 2 were for the fridge alarm, and these questions show proficiency using the CircuitPlayground. My students have the Bluefruit variety, the light sensor, built-in buttons, conditionals, loops, interrupting functions and loops, neopixels, and sound play while animating LEDs. Let's get to those answers. The next 2 questions are the fridge alarm. To build a fridge alarm that will catch culprits red-handed when they open the fridge door, and the light from the fridge door or the ambient light from a room should trigger the alarm to pulse and play siren.wave. So you can find the folder alarm with siren.wave. Notice it's not the MP3 file, you're using the WAV file at our regular URL where we have our files. The first line of the code should comment last name, first name, just like you have, and the second line should say Q4-Fridge-Alarm.py. When the code is started, make sure that you print out, and when first running, the alarm should be off. Now pressing A should arm the alarm. It should print out armed in all capitals with an exclamation mark, then activating things after 5 seconds. So that gives you enough time to close the fridge door so that the light goes off. Now opening the fridge with the alarm armed should activate simultaneous red pulsing and the siren wave sound play. A reading value from the sensor of about 6,000 should work for detecting the fridge light, and when the alarm goes off just before pulsing and playing sound, print alarm going off at reading, where reading is the value of the light sensor. Now pressing B should turn off the alarm. When B is pressed, also print disarmed. You might see repeated disarmed messages print to the console while your finger is holding down button B. That is totally fine and expected. Pressing button A should rearm the alarm. It's okay to hold your finger down on B until the sound pulse cycle is done. Save your work as Q4-Fridge-Alarm.py. And here's an example of how things should work. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over to our files folder and right-click and download the alarm folder. Then I'll drag that into my CircuitPy volume. I can see it's there. I don't need to get rid of the MP3 file, but that'll just remind me that I'm working with the WAV and only the WAV. Then I'll start out with my 2 comments, and I don't want to forget to print Q4 code running. And I'll import board, time, neopixel. And I'm going to add the 2 default buttons for the CircuitPlayground Bluefruit, so I'll find the code on my tip sheet and paste it into my code. Up next, I want to get the code to configure the light sensor, so here it is in the tip sheet. I'm going to highlight and copy everything here. And on my code, I need to import analog I/O, and I'll paste the code below. Note that I'm calling my light sensor light_sensor, and I get the sensor reading by saying light_sensor.value. I'm going to delete that line, but I'll put it in a while true statement down below. Now, since we want to play sound, we also need to find the code to set up audio for the CPB speaker, and here it is. Copy that. Paste it in my code, speaker set up, but we need to get code for playing a WAV file as well. Here it is. I'll paste this before my while true, and I'm going to change my path to alarm. You see, that's the name of the folder that I copied over to my CPB. And now we'll set up the neopixels on the board with pixels equals neopixel.neopixel and in parentheses board.allcaps_neopixel, comma 10. And oh yeah, I'll set pixels.brightness equal to 0.0 and pixels.fill equal to, in parentheses again, 255, 0, that'll be red. Then I'm going to create a variable to keep track of whether or not the alarm is armed. So I'm going to do that just before while true. I'll say armed equals false. Then down in my while true code, I'll set reading equal to light sensor.value, and then if button_a.value colon, indented below this, armed equals true, I'm going to print out in all caps armed with an exclamation point, and to wait 5 seconds, I say time.sleep passing in 5.0. Then I'll outdent. What happens if I press button B? Well, if button B dot value colon indented armed equals false, and I'm going to print out disarmed. But now how do I react when I get the reading that will trigger the alarm at a point when the alarm is armed? Well, I can say if armed equals true and reading is greater than, I think I might have said 6,000, I used 5,000 here, colon. Either of those will work fine. And also remember, when I say armed equals true, we're essentially saying, hey, if a true false value equals true, I can get rid of the equals true. That essentially says if armed true, if I get a true value here and the reading is greater than 5,000, indented below, I'm going to print out an F string, and in between quotes, alarm going off at colon, and in between curlies, I'll print out the reading variable, and then below, I'm going to call play_sound, passing in siren.wave. Now, we don't just want to play that sound, we want to pulse the lights when the sound is playing as well. We know how to do that. I'm going to create a function called pulse with def space pulse, open and close parens, colon. My pixels.brightness should already be 0.0, but I'll set that just in case. No harm in doing that. And then I'm going to loop through the values 0 through 100 with for I in range and in parentheses 101 colon. Then indented below, I'll say pixels.brightness equals I divided by 100. And the reason that I do that is brightness is a number from 0 to 1. And it's a decimal value, so I don't have to convert that to an int. Then below this, I want to do that in reversed. And actually, I can just copy these two lines, paste them down below, but reversed my range. And as I provide the voiceover, I know I made an error. I didn't call pulse where I had my pass in my play sound function. We'll fix that in a bit. Also, while I'm running this, I noticed that my board doesn't have the NeoPixel library installed. We'll fix that. Control T, then Q gets me to the prompt, and I want to circ up install -A. That'll install all the libraries that I need that are referenced in my code.py file. After that install, I ran this, and while the alarm sound played, I noticed that I didn't get the pulsing. That's right, I got to go back here, and I've got to call my pulse function where the pass value was in my play sound function. But now it works just as shown in the demonstration video. Nice. I'll save my work, and we're ready to move on to question 5. And here's question 5. That's the instant off alarm. So we're going to modify what we just did with question 4, change the second line to the comment that says that this is question 5. When the code starts, we also want to make sure that we print out that code 5 is running. And when button B is pressed, we should instantly shut off the alarm this time and stop the pulse. Press A should realarm it just as previously. And when we're done, we should save this as Q5 instant off.py. And this is how things should work. And let's change the comment up top to read Q5 underscore instant underscore off. And we'll also change the print statement so that that indicates that Q5 is running. Now we're no longer going to check to see if button B is pressed in our while true loop. We want to check to see if it's pressed while the button is pulsing. So I'm going to highlight these 3 lines and cut them out. And now we want to check to see if a button B is pressed anytime the pulse is happening. So I'm going to paste that underneath my loop that goes through the range from 0 to 100. But if this happens, I'm not going to set arm as a global variable. Instead, I'm going to return a variable here. So I'll get rid of that first line. Then below printing disarmed, I'm going to return the value false to indicate not only to stop running the pulse function, but also to stop the sound from playing. Then I'm going to highlight these 3 lines for the if statement, and I'm going to paste them in, indented below the pixel.brightness in my reversed range here. That makes sure that I'll catch the button B press at any time when I'm pulsing up or pulsing down. But if button B wasn't pressed at all, well, I want to outdent even to my for loops, and I want to return true. That means no button B was pressed. Now we got to make some changes up here in the play sound function. So instead of just calling pulse, we're going to also get the return value. I'm going to call that keep_playing and set that equal to whatever is returned by pulse. And if keep_playing is double equal to false colon, that means the button was pressed. And if button B was pressed, we should set pixels.brightness equal to 0.0. That turns off the lights. We should also stop the sound with audio.stop, open and close parens, and we should return false. Now this is also really important, and it's really easy to forget. You want to make sure that you outdent even to the while audio playing and return true. So this is going to ensure that the alarm and the pulse will continue until button B is pressed. So by returning true after the audio is playing, so the while is done, we're going to go down here into our if armed and reading, and we're going to make sure that armed is set to whatever we returned from this function play_sound. Now there's one other bit that's really important. If you slam the door right away after it went through one cycle of playing the alarm and pulsing, it would stop going off, and we don't want that to happen. That's because subsequent readings will probably be less than 5,000. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, we want to keep track of a flag that says if the fridge has been opened or not. So before I start my while true loop, I'm going to set door_opened equal to false. Then down below, just before I check to see if armed, I'm now going to check to see if reading greater than or equal to, I guess I could say 6,000 this time instead of the 5,000 I originally had, colon, door_opened equals, and now this is going to be true. So if this is true, well, when do I want to set off the alarm? If the armed is set and door_opened, meaning I've got a light sensor reading that indicates the door's open. Now I actually don't need to check to see if the door is opened every single time I pass through my while true loop. What's going to turn off the alarm now is if button B is pressed, and then the armed value that's returned is going to be false. So my if and statement is never going to go off once button B is pressed, because button B is going to come back false. But if button A is pressed, what I'm going to do is right under I set armed equals true, I'm also going to set door_opened equals false. So this will assume that I don't have any reading that's going to set the alarm off, but after 5 seconds, if I get a reading that's going to set the alarm off, if it's greater than or equal to 6,000, then door opened is true. My armed is also set, so I'm going to set off my alarm. And that will work, and it'll produce results just like this. When I tested this, I also put my hand over the alarm while it was going off, just to make sure that you had properly set that flag so that somebody couldn't slam the refrigerator door and shut off the alarm. And I'm going to assume that you saved this properly. Now on to question 6. Nice. Now let's go ahead and save this to our exam folder. To my students, I hope you did well, and if not, I hope you now understand the proper solution. And for the independent learners and educators following my course, I hope you found this useful as well. Keep hacking.